As technology improved, so did cars. But in many cases, improvements have actually been more of a trade-off than simple progress. For example, Unibody provided lighter, safer designs with greater impact absorption and passenger protection. It also allowed for a lower floor pan with reduced ride height and a lower center of gravity. Somewhat meaningless now with the popularity of the crossover SUV with raised seating positions. But there were numerous actual trade-offs with Unibody, such as a significant loss of structural rigidity, which meant it was more likely to take expensive structural damage from things such as a minor collision, hardcore off-roading, or opening the door while one corner was on a jack, which is why older cars are more durable off-roaders than modern crossovers. Something manufacturers have spent decades attempting to improve on, often bragging about what percentage a new model was stiffer than the previous model, in an effort to fix what they broke. But still, damage that would have been considered simply cosmetic on an older full-frame vehicle could be enough for an insurance company to classify as totaled on a newer vehicle. Not helped by crumple zones, weak points engineered into the frame to control where failure will occur, an important safety innovation with a trade-off of making cars more disposable, in theory sacrificing the vehicle to better protect the passengers. Anticipating damage in design of a new car is nothing new, with crumple zones first appearing in 1959, 30 years after unitized construction first appeared. And in the mid-1930s, Checker designed its fenders in a way that they could be crashed into and the wheels would still roll freely without being hindered. A different sort of impact protection. However, not only did Unibody make the cost of repair higher, but the cost of development. A unitized body required changes in structure to offer different shapes, effectively putting an end to the days when a model was offered in multiple body styles, and increasing the cost of updating the styling. But in spite of pretty much everything short of heavy-duty trucks moving to unitized construction, weight has actually increased. Why? Well, features. Things like padding, sound insulation, and various pumps, such as power steering, emissions, and air conditioning. But primarily it has been the electronic features. Cameras, display screens, and most of all, electric motors. Not electric car electric motors, but in such things as power seats, windows, lift gates, and soft closing doors and trunks. Hybrids and electrics would prove to be even heavier, but that is mostly due to the batteries, typically adding 800 pounds to a vehicle, give or take a couple hundred pounds. So to try to compensate for all this added weight, manufacturers would move away from heavy construction materials, such as cast iron and steel, and move to plastic, aluminum, and carbon fiber. In most cases, plastic is cheap, but it is also less durable. And although Saturn advertised their plastic body panels as dent-resistant, it does crack and break. Neither aluminum nor carbon fiber body panels are all that common at this point, outside of higher-end vehicles, mostly because they are expensive to make and expensive to repair. But aluminum mechanical components have been around for quite a while, and aluminum engines are certainly lighter, and they have better temperature exchange. However, when stressed, they are also more likely to take heat damage, leading to blown head gaskets or warped heads or worse, which is why old engines, such as the flathead Ford, were often rebuilt repeatedly, as needed, while modern engines are more likely to have to be replaced than rebuilt. And yet another move to reduce weight and cost has been a reduction in size, decreasing passenger and cargo room, forcing some creative innovations in packaging efficiency, which is one of the reasons there was a big push to front-wheel drive vehicles. But buyers still transition to big, heavy trucks and SUVs with more room and power. A lot of the motivation behind the mostly failed attempts at weight reduction have been aimed at increasing mileage, which has led to several other changes, such as the move to so-called highway gears, in essence sacrificing acceleration in an attempt to keep RPMs lower during normal driving. Reasonable, except the difference in performance was typically much more perceptible than the difference in mileage, because while driving, difficulty passing and merging is more noticeable than a few more miles per gallon. And of course there was, and is again, a move to smaller, presumably more efficient engines, which naturally creates a power deficit, often dealt with by adding a turbo, effectively removing most of the advantage of changing to a smaller engine. In theory, smaller turbo engines can provide similar power and better mileage than a bigger, normally aspirated engine. At least in test cycles it can. But they also are more stressed, often leading to a shorter lifespan, and they tend to be buzzy, with higher levels of noise and vibration, as well as suffer from turbo lag, along with a sudden rush that gives the perception of better performance than it may actually provide. Which is all part of the reason the concept was mostly abandoned after the 1980s in favor of increases in cubic inches. There's no substitute and all that. But as stated, the trend of smaller turbo engines has come around again. Safety is also often a trade-off. Take crash protection, for example. In an effort to create a safety cage around the passengers, support pillars have been thickened and belt lines have been raised, causing a massive reduction in outward visibility, creating a different safety issue. The solution seems to involve large amounts of expensive technology, such as cameras and sensors, to warn you of things that you can't see. Why would you need a clear 360-degree view out of the vehicle when you can pay extra for pedestrian detection and blind spot warning systems? Even something simple as bumpers have seen a history of trade-offs. Little more than a bar across the front and back to protect the vehicle from minor collisions, they could be used to push other vehicles, either to simply get them out of the road or to push or bump start. In the early 70s, the requirements for these bumpers were increased from needing to withstand a 3-mile-an-hour impact to a 5-mile-an-hour impact, on average adding 300 pounds to each vehicle while adversely affecting performance and mileage, just in time for the fuel crisis. Then they started covering the bumpers with bodywork for styling and aerodynamic reasons, usually a plastic fascia, meaning the bumper no longer protected the body of the car as they were covered by the body, and they certainly couldn't be used for pushing another vehicle, at least not without causing damage, which is why police vehicles are often equipped with a frame-mounted bumper guard. Besides, attempting a bump start in a modern vehicle could set off the airbag. Airbags, of course, being a required safety feature that can save lives, as long as you are in a specific height and weight range. Otherwise, they can be deadly. Of course, they expire, which is why it is recommended they are replaced every 10 years, which I'm sure everyone does, because faulty airbags are no longer a safety feature, but a hazard. And then there are emissions. Nobody wants to drive a polluting, stinking vehicle, but nobody wants to pay more for a less powerful, less economical vehicle either, particularly one that is harder to work on and yet needs more maintenance. And increasing technology continues to discourage the shade tree mechanic, perhaps a blessing to dealer mechanics, as changing a dash light has changed from taking a few minutes to taking a few days. And the issue isn't as simple as a need for greater expertise, but also a need for a significantly greater amount of tools, many of which can be incredibly expensive and may only be usable on one make of vehicle of a specific period. Proprietary tools for proprietary parts have reached ridiculous levels, which is why there has been an increase of repair shops that specialize in specific types or years of vehicles. And the days of a supplier providing the same item to multiple manufacturers are quickly disappearing, let alone universal parts that fit nearly every vehicle, such as headlights. Now that a bulb and the lens are different parts, a manufacturer may not use the same part for either on any of their vehicles. But a mid-70s Dodge pickup headlight was one piece, and it could not only be used on many other Chrysler products of the same period, but also on, say, a 40 Ford, or a 57 Chevy, or a 63 Volkswagen, and so on, although it will be dimmer on a 6-volt system than a 12. And not all technology provides an improvement, such as the touchscreen, more of a sales gimmick than a technological improvement, like the tail fin, but more so. It's an ergonomic nightmare aimed to appeal at a demographic that is less likely to drive. It is distracting, complicated, unintuitive, and provides no tactile feedback, all in an attempt to add features most people don't care about and will never use, or will just find the mode they like and simply leave it there. And then when it fails, it will fail more completely. Why lose control of one system when you can lose them all at once? And although in theory it can be upgraded as well as downgraded as needed for as long as they work, the parts will quickly become obsolete and irreplaceable. And naturally, the common trade-off for advanced features in technology is cost, which is why historically buyers have passed on advanced features when given the option, meaning it is not unusual for features to become standard decades after they are first introduced as options, presuming they last long enough to do so. Does that mean that buyers don't think all this trade-off is worth it? Well, it depends on the buyer and what the trade-off is. But as things progress, the choice has become less and less the customer's, which to me doesn't seem like an improvement. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.